Ladies and gentlemen, I am what you call a babu. But I'd like to show to you through this presentation that there are some babus who perform in extraordinarily difficult circumstances and make an impact far greater than many in the corporate sector. Which is why I've called this In Defense of the Indefensible, given all that you read about in the popular media about the IAS and babus. Let me start with a favorite quote. The majority, we all work with the political executive, and that fundamentally transforms the ecosystem in which we work. James I and Louis XIV taught that the king can do no wrong, and their successors lost their heads. Hegel and his disciples taught that the state can do no wrong and plunged the world into war. Our doctrinaire Democrats, people that you and I elect, teach that the majority can do no wrong and bid fair to wreck civilization completely. Is it a dream or a nightmare working inside government? How is working in the government very different from working in the corporate sector? First and foremost, you report to a political boss with few very honorable exceptions. Working with a political executive is often far more challenging than working with a corporate boss. I'm on record saying this, and N. Chandra, dear friend of mine who runs TCS, he could not have taken TCS to where it is today if he was reporting to a Pappu Yadav and not to a Ratan Tata. That fundamentally changes the ecosystem. The Durga Shakti example. Often the honest IAS officer is a shield between a rapacious political executive and an illiterate citizenry, and often gets caught in the middle. We are expected to deliver market-like performance, market-like efficiency in an ecosystem with pay and perks which are hardly market-like. More on that in a minute. We are always under a microscope. There's a judiciary watching you, there's a media watching you, and with all due respects to all my friends in the media, I've been in the media myself, media often looks for stories which says dog, which doesn't say dog bites man, but it says man bites dog. And therefore, we end up on the front pages of newspapers, often for the most wrong reasons. And we have a unionized subordinate staff, which is often very hard to discipline. In other words, the belief is that if you send someone from the private sector into government, they will do far better than what a civil servant does. But I would like to humbly submit and prove to you through this presentation that the distribution of honesty and indeed effectiveness is not significantly different across professions. I want to start with a fable of Tenali Rama, who I'm sure you've all heard of. Tenali Rama was Krishna Deva Raya's court jester. One day, a poet came and sung praises about Krishna Deva Raya in his court, and the king was duly impressed, and he elevated him and made him a minister. This disturbed Tenali Rama a lot, and Tenali Rama said, my God, this guy is a poet, and suddenly he's become a minister in this cabinet, only because he speaks well and he's flattered the king. So next day he invites the king and the cabinet to his home for a lunch. And he goes and gets the most well-known carpenter in the city and asks him to make the most ornate table. The table gets made, and he tells the carpenter, you made this table, now can you please cook some food? The carpenter says, look, I'm a carpenter, how can I cook? He said, no, you cook whatever you want to, the king is coming and he'll eat it. So on this ornate table, the carpenter cooks food and lays it out, and the next day the cabinet shows up. The king looks at the table and says, my God, what an ornate table. This is the most beautiful table I've seen in my life. And then he takes the first spoonful of the food and puts it in his mouth and spits it out. And he says, Tenali, what is this? How can you serve me such horrible food? Tenali Rama comes back and says, oh my Lord, 1,000 apologies. I thought just as a good poet can become a good minister, likewise a good carpenter can become a good cook too. What I'm trying to say is success in one profession does not automatically guarantee success in another profession. And I have examples here. Examples of people who've been exceptionally successful in the private sector. Take one, Paul O'Neill, who built Alcoa. Paul O'Neill was a disaster as the US Treasury Secretary. Likewise, Robert McNamara, the legendary CEO of the Ford Motor Company, but when he became the US Defense Secretary, many regard him as the source of many of their national security problems. And we have some examples in India as well. Again, to prove that many of those who are successes in the private sector are not necessarily automatic successes inside the government. Okay, I'm going to show to you examples of 12 case studies of officers across the spectrum, across sectors. Each slide is one case to give you examples of people who transformed the ecosystem under them. The first one, something very close to my heart. Between 1994 and 2003, Chandrababu Naidu ruled Andhra Pradesh. And with him were a group of committed officers whose names you see there. From a time when Andhra was virtually on the street with a begging bowl, unable to pay even their salaries, to becoming one of the foremost investment clusters in Asia, which Goldman Sachs in its BRIC report valued at $5.2 billion. Just one example, Microsoft's only offshore development center, which is in Redmond, Seattle, outside Redmond, Seattle, is in Hyderabad. Bill Gates could have put his finger anywhere on the global map then and would have had a red carpet rolled out. But imagine a state which was nowhere on the global investment map, much less the IT map, which came and became the home to Microsoft. Likewise, GE's largest back office is in Hyderabad. Amazon, Google, you name the state, you name the company you want in the Fortune 100, most of them have a significant presence in Andhra Pradesh and in Hyderabad. And in 1993, people weren't sure where Hyderabad was. The numbers speak for themselves. Exports in 2010 out of the STPH of Hyderabad was 35,000 crores, up from just 65 crores in 1996. Employment, 64,000 in 2000, up to 2.5 million in 2010. Companies, 31 in 1995, up to 1,100 in 2010. The data speaks for itself. All of you today will be paying your electricity bills online and interacting with government for several of your functions online. The whole business of e-governance, that is separating the point of decision of a government service from the point of delivery of a government service, was pioneered in Andhra by these officers. And today, if you can, the convenience and the unparalleled attack that this does on corruption is perhaps something which you have to see to believe. For example, transacting in land. You can sit anywhere in the world. If you have a piece of land in Andhra Pradesh, you can transact on it via the web. You don't have to visit a sub-registrar's office, pay a bribe, lose a day's wages, and then transact. Again, pioneers in e-governance. Again, a bunch of IAS officers who probably many of you have not heard of. Let me go into mining. All of you heard of Gully Janardhan Reddy and the mining mafia. How many of you know that there was an IPS officer and 2 IFS officers who took them on? V.V. Lakshmi Narayana, who took the mining mafia on, and along with it, the IAS and IPS officers who protected them. U.V. Singh and Vishwajit Singh, 2 outstanding IFS officers, went through 40 lakh entries, 40 lakh banking records and entries to trace the money trail. In 10 working days, another officer, Bishwajit Mishra, when he was posted in Bellary, in 10 working days, recovered 20 crores due to the government from the miners before he got transferred out. CBI, and today the loss reported, as per the Lokayukta Santosh Hegde's report, is 12,228 crores of national wealth. And the officers who are tracking it down and fixing accountability are these 3 officers. R.K. Raghavan. R.K. Raghavan is the man now better known for investigating the Gujarat riots. R.K. Raghavan, very few people know, when he returned in 1991 after finishing the Hubert Humphrey Fellowship, was posted at Sri Perumbudur when the late Prime Minister Sri Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated. R.K. Raghavan was in civies and there were mobs running riot. This man single-handedly guarded the body of late Rajiv Gandhi through that fateful night without any weapon on his hand. He's handled several sensitive cases like the Bombay Blast case, the match-fixing scandal, and today, whenever the Supreme Court looks to set up a SIT, Raghavan is the first officer they trust with it. Rangachari is an IRS officer. The insurance sector, today we all go for private insurances like ICICI, Lombard, Prudential, etc. 10 years back, when IRDA was set up, the private insurance industry did not exist. Today, 13 years later, the penetration level as a percentage of GDP has gone up from 2.3% to almost 9% today. And the premium has grown at a CAGR of almost 22% year on year. I have met several leading CEOs of insurance companies, including Hank Greenberg, the legendary American AIG chairman, who told me that India's insurance companies owe a debt of gratitude to one man, N. Rangachari. When I interviewed Rangachari for this presentation, he told me he just did 2 things. He ensured that there was a level playing field, and he ensured that world-class infrastructure is put in place for private companies to compete with LIC and others on the same scale and same level. So today, if you have an insurance company, it's largely due to the efforts of this one man called N. Rangachari. Very interesting example from Karnataka. GAIL has laid a pipeline for gas. It's a 1,000-kilometer pipeline. About 800 kilometers of it flows through Karnataka and the rest to Maharashtra. Please see the dates on the slide carefully. 4,000 government clearances were given by the government of Karnataka, the Ministry of Environment, Railways, Forests, and GOI in a record period of between, roughly about 120 days. We all talk of bureaucrats being a hindrance to business. Thanks to the drive of S.V. Ranganath, the Chief Secretary of Karnataka, and Vandita Sharma, and the team from GAIL, the pipeline's construction, the MOU was signed in May 2010, construction began around November 2010, and February 2013, gas is flowing through this pipeline, and Toyota has been the first company to purchase gas. Against the backdrop when bureaucrats are normally risk-averse, conservative, don't take decisions, here is a rare example of a group of people who have done clearances at an extraordinary pace across governments, across organizations, to ensure that this becomes a reality. We've all heard of the power miracle in Gujarat. Gujarat is the only state today, and the numbers speak for themselves, where 10 years ago to the power deficit state, the Gujarat Electricity Board was running losses. Today it's a surplus state. Who is the officer behind it? Narendra Modi, of course, is the political leader who made it happen, and Saurabh Patel. But the officer behind it is a lady called Manjula Subramaniam, who was given a free hand and political support by Narendra Modi to make this happen. Gujarat is today the only state which has 24/7, three-phase power supply to all 18,000 villages. If you look at the data on Gujarat, the transmission and distribution losses were as bad as any other state in 2000-2001. Gujarat set up and filed 100,000 FIRs of power theft across the state, which requires, of course, a lot of political support. But Manjula got after them and got done what is called the Jyoti Gram program, where there was feeder separation of the agricultural and household feeders, and now they are moving on to things like smart metering. 100,000 FIRs filed in the space of 2 to 3 years, and crackdown on power thefts by the bureaucracy in Gujarat and the separation of feeders led to today Gujarat being a power surplus state. S.R. Rao and Surat, I don't know how many of you remember, in 1994 there was an outbreak of plague in Surat. The whole city was affected, and a 300-year-old city, 2.5 million were threatened to be affected, and 130 square kilometers was affected. 56 people died, and there were areas where even the army refused to go into. When I interviewed army officers posted then for this survey, they told me that S.R. Rao set up his office in the back of an army truck and lived in the truck for 3 months. And he, along with Narendra Modi, went to areas where the army was reluctant to go to rescue people. And Surat's model on disease surveillance and disease prevention was subsequently adopted by the World Bank and is today their model benchmark used around the world for such disasters. Such was the effectiveness of S.R. Rao that people who had built illegal constructions in the heart of the city, which is often what leads to such epidemics breaking out and what you saw in Uttarakhand recently, people voluntarily came forward and even started demolishing temples and mosques, seeing the action which Rao was taking. Water supply coverage increased from 60% to 98%, and sewerage coverage, watch this number, 30%, went up to 88%, all thanks to the leadership of one man, S.R. Rao, who won the Padma Shri for his work. Dr. I.V. Subbarao, I don't know how many of you have been to Tirupati. Tirupati overtook the Vatican last year, or the year before last, to become the richest temple in the world. About 25,000 to 1 lakh people visit Tirupati every single day. If you go to Tirupati, the queues there are often for a day to 2 to 3 days, depending on the number of people, who go in for a darshan of the Lord for 5 seconds. What did S.R. Rao do? S.R. Rao, along with Tata Consultancy Services, created a wristband, something like this Nike fuel band that I'm wearing, which developed an algorithm which looked at the average queuing time, and you go to a gate where your barcode is scanned on the wristband, and you will definitely have a darshan between 2 to 4 hours of the time slot given to you. They will give you a slot 10 to 1 or 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and you will have the darshan in that. Imagine the hardship for pilgrims who are coming from far off places, standing in queues for 2 to 3 days to get a 5-second or 10-second darshan of the Lord, cut down thanks to the efforts of this one man. He's a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, today the Chief Literacy Officer at UNESCO in Paris. And he told me that he believes in change that is desirable, doable, and durable. Again, we know this is a conference of management thinkers, but these are practitioners, people who actually made things happen on the ground using ideas of those thinkers and of many others. Pradeep Kharola and, E-Sugam. E-Sugam is the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence winner for this year. Pradeep Kharola, the dynamic IAS officer who made it happen. There are 4.5 lakh returns filed by traders in Karnataka every single month, and 32,000 per annum is the collection in 2012-13, up from 18,000 crores in 2009-10. Every transaction is today captured online. And look at the most important thing in the third bullet. 100 lakh visits. 100 lakh visits by traders every single day to the commercial tax offices across the state of Karnataka has virtually come down to a zero, because now everything is done online. Just imagine 100 lakh visits, imagine the bribe per visit. And you can imagine how much revenue has been saved for the state and how much has been black money which was going into the system has been stopped by virtue of Kharola's project, which won the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in 2013. The Bangalore Metro. The Bangalore Metro in May 2008, when Srivatsa took over, was less than 0.1% of its budget had been spent, the 12,000 crore budget. And Bangalore is today adding 2,500 vehicles per day and has in excess of 3 million vehicles today. So there's a crying need for a modern public transport system. As of December 2010, about 4,000 crores were spent and the first line is up. The second line is being inaugurated next month. The trials are starting now. And ridership is designed to carry passengers in excess of 1 million per day. Just look at the dates again. In May 2008, that is 5 years ago or less, the project hadn't started. Today, we have 2 lines about to be up and running. One line is already carrying passengers, and the second line is up and running. In sharp contrast to the private metros in Mumbai and the airport line in Delhi, this is, which are both delayed and over budget. Bangalore Metro is an example of a metro which is being constructed on time and under budget. Again, thanks to the efforts of one man leading a team of exceptional people in Srivatsa. Vijay Kurian, India's first, is not working properly, India's first commercial airport. Much before we got the fancy model concession agreement, the first PPP airport in India was set up by a man called Vijay Kurian, 86 batch IAS officer of Kerala cadre. The total cost of the airport, including the cost of land, was 300 crores. I don't know how to tell you what is the cost of the Delhi airport, how much of grant was given, how much of land was given as a subsidy. I'm not going into that at all. Vijay Kurian constructed the first PPP airport, 300 crores, 4.5 million passengers visited it in 2011, and rupees 100 crore profit every single year. And imagine, they don't charge a user fee at all, and their landing fees are 20% lower than most of the private commercial airports in India, be it Delhi, Hyderabad, or Bombay. 250 crores of total revenue is what they get, out of which non-aeronautical is about 52%. And for doing this from conception to first landing, 6 years, including 13 acres of land were acquired and 800 odd homes were demolished and people were rehabilitated. Kurian came back in 2 tenures. He came first, he went off, and he was brought back again now for the expansion, which should tell you that how much of faith the government has in his leadership. There is no concession agreement. Please note, no model concession agreement, no fancy frameworks, done all by the work of one man and his team, Vijay Kurian. Pratyay Amrit. I don't know how many of you have heard of Pratyay Amrit. He won the PM's award year before last. Bihar, the most famous Bimaru state of India, where the roads never became like Hema Malini's cheeks, though there were several people who averred to making them so. He's the managing director of the Bihar Pul Nirgan Nigam. just look at this one statistics. From 1947 till the time Pratyay took over, BPRNR in its first 30 years of existence had done 314 bridges in all. Whereas in his period, they have successfully completed 336 projects, and from 2006 till date have done almost 14,000 kilometers of roads and highways in Bihar. You just need to think, what is it that is making this guy succeed in the same organization, with the same engineers, with the same ecosystem, which was there before, and that didn't work. He won the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in 2011. I'd like to end with a quote from one of the most famous alums from my alma mater, Harvard Business School, George Bush. George said, the answers to the enemies of human well-being. He said, our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm us and our country, and neither do we. Ladies and gentlemen, I think every country, the fundamental tenet is, every society and every country gets the leaders it deserves. The good news for India is, despite all the chaos that it looks at from the outside, and I got some interesting pictures for you of the chaos which we are all used to as Indians seeing, despite all the chaos that we see from the outside, India, we claim, continues to grow at 6% rate of growth. India is at 66, and the rupee, I hope, is at 66 and not at 75 since the time I began talking. Thank you very much for your time. I'm grateful and happy to take any questions. Yes, please.
I can give you one more example of Andhra Pradesh. Raghavendra Rao did excellent work during the former actor chief minister. He did an excellent work on that. But my question to you, sir, is this. Why these stories are not often repeated everywhere else?
Why is, sorry?
These stories are not repeated everywhere else. Why doesn't the IAS bureaucracy itself take on these things everywhere?
Look, as I mentioned in one of my slides, the greatest thing about the IAS is, and I challenge any of you to disagree with me on this, it is the only profession in India, if not in the world, where you can have a substantive disagreement with your boss and still not lose your job. Tell me one other profession where you can have a substantive disagreement on a substantive issue with your superior and stay on in that job forever. We have the constitutional protection of Article 311, which is what makes the IAS different. Having said that, you and I elect a political executive. End of the day, the IAS is a tool. The IAS is not getting elected. It's a tool to be used. There are chief ministers with vision who know how to use the tool well. There are others who don't, and I don't want to name them here. But there are people who misuse it, and equally, I'm the first to concede, there are enough crooks in the IAS and IPS who go and prostrate before those who want to misuse them and say, please misuse us. So the long answer to your question is, there's absolutely no substitute for leadership and for human character. If someone wants to use a tool well, it's the same Google Maps that the terrorists use for planting bombs, and it's the same Google Maps you and I use for getting to this location. It depends how are we used. The IAS can push this much and no further. Let's not forget, in the 2G scam, the man who blew the lid was an IAS officer. He was finally removed, and they had to wait for someone else to come before the scam happened. So the IAS does its bit. It tries to be a constitutional protection. It tries to protect citizens from moves which are harmful in public interest. But at the end of the day, there is a political executive you and I elect, and they are, for good or worse, the political masters, as they are called. I, for one, believe personally, and I've said this in writing, that perhaps the time has come to rethink the relationship between the political executive and the permanent executive. How much control should they have? Which will then lead to far greater creativity and leadership from the IAS on their own if they want to do it. Yes, please.
Arvind,
my question is, you've spoken a lot about public-private partnership in the government that's really encouraged so many good projects and schemes to happen. What do you think about entrepreneurship? What can government do to encourage entrepreneurs to play a bigger role in improving our society?
Look, I think the one simple thing which the government can do, and I hope whoever becomes the Prime Minister next takes this as a to-do. The World Bank does something called the Doing Business Reports, which are fairly accurate. The Doing Business Reports of 2013 on contract enforcement, on several other parameters, India ranks below even Lesotho, right? Lesotho is in sub-Saharan Africa, in case you didn't know. We are ranked below Lesotho on contract enforcement. We are below Congo on many other things. One thing the government can do is to set up a to-do that we will improve ourselves on that ranking from 128 or 139, wherever we are today, and move up every year in that ranking. That is namely ease of doing business. The minute you have ease of doing business, it will automatically encourage entrepreneurs to come up with better ideas and perform in an ecosystem which is conducive for them to grow. Yes, please. You had a question.
I was wondering whether Indian IAS officers who showed leadership, they stand at higher pedestal, or Indian entrepreneurs who created big wealth and created so many jobs. In your opinion, who should be ranked higher? Taking her question further.
I think there's several paths to reach God. What is important that you find God? Which way you find God doesn't matter. The fact that I have stayed on in the IAS after doing an MBA from HBS, means I believe, in my limited personal judgment, that you find God through the IAS. Many believe the IAS is God. I don't believe so. But it's up to each to his own. You need a diverse set of inspirations and commitments in society for a society to prosper. You can't just have one. These are not mutually exclusive.
But what you are giving example is hardly 1% of the total cadre, not even 1%, it will be 0.01%. So how you glorify this cadre?
Look, these are 12 selected cases. I can perhaps give you more, but I agree. The idea again is not to glorify officers. These are officers you haven't heard of. And I told Amit, I'll present something which will be different from what you hear of in everyday life, which is why I chose them. The idea is not to glorify officers. The idea is to glorify what made them successful despite the circumstances they faced. The circumstances Manjula Subramaniam faced heading Gujarat's electricity board was probably no different from what many managing directors in the electricity companies face when they take over. But she made it happen. So it's not about glorifying these people. You can certainly celebrate successes in the IAS, but I think what is important is what the lessons we take away from this, which can be replicated elsewhere. Yes, sir.
Could you go with the question?
Do you have time? Shiva, it's a very interesting talk.
Thank you.
I had a couple of very quick questions.
Yeah.
What made you get into IAS? And secondly, are enough people of the similar caliber willing to get into IAS today?
The answer to the first question is something very personal. I was in 1987 leaving for Stanford when I lost my father. The night I was leaving, I got a full scholarship to go to Stanford. I lost my dad. It was his last wish on his deathbed to see me in the IAS work for our country. So it changed the path of my life permanently. That's why I got into the IAS and I'm still here. There are people far better caliber than I am in the service. I'd like to firmly believe so. There are thugs of exceptional caliber in the IAS, which is why I said the distribution of honesty and dishonesty is not very different. You have honest and dishonest IAS officers, you have honest and dishonest corporate CEOs, you have honest and dishonest journalists. And I can give you examples in every single profession of honesty and dishonesty. I just believe the IAS works as a trust. We are a trust to the people's money and their confidence in us. And therefore, the standards expected of the IAS should be higher. And I, for one, firmly believe. There are many in my own batch, my batch of 1994, who are far better than me, far brighter than me. You often don't see them in the media eye. I'll give you an example. I had a batchmate called Dashrath Prasad, who resisted paying bribes in Tripura from the Naxals. He resisted paying bribes. He was a simple guy from Varanasi, posted in Tripura in an outpost. They walked into his office one day and shot him. And he died. How many corporate CEOs, for the pay that we get and the so-called perks, will go and risk his life doing this? One example of someone upholding the law in one part of the country. You saw examples in Tamil Nadu recently, where a group of 6 young IAS officers refused to let Jayalalitha appoint the people she wanted for the midday meal scheme as cooks and workers. They said, we won't do it. One of them got transferred, others did not, and they stood their ground. So I think the caliber of the IAS is exceptional. The people get in through, as a personal comment, I've taken the IIT entrance, the IIM entrance, the GRE, the GMAT, and the IAS, and I've been successful in all of them. I would say with my hand on my heart, by far, the toughest exam in the world is the IAS. You have 500,000 or 400,000 people writing it for 80 seats, out of which 40 are reserved. It's an exam which is like a PhD, it lasts a whole year. So the screening criteria is damn good. Once they come in, they're very motivated, they work very hard. But somewhere along the way, some of us lose our way.
Great, Srivatsa. Thanks a lot. I think this was an exceptionally courageous talk.